Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom and welcome to the Burnettwork. It's RM here, and I have Stubble McShave with me. Hi, Stubble. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Nice to see you. Hope there are some people out there as well.
Absolutely, Stubble. It's been a while since you and I have done a stream together. It's been quite some time. We've covered, uh, the Wheel of Time together and did review
Right.
shows together. But this is one. It's been a little while. It's good to see you again. And of course, the reason why you and I are here today is because you recommended this fantastic book called Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And of course, Andy Weir is the award winning author who also wrote The Martian, right, Stubble?
Yes. Yes. And it's pretty similar in many ways, but yeah, it's the same author.
Well, I have to say, as someone who has not read The Martian but seen the movie, and now having read Hail Mary, Project Hail Mary, I wonder about the way they interpreted The Martian, if it is that similar. I think I'm not quite sure whether the way it's interpreted, or at least the way that it's portrayed, that the movie did the book justice. But I've often heard people say that it's very difficult to adapt a book, especially with something that Andy Weir has written when he's such an incredible author and writer. It's not the easiest thing to adapt into a screenplay. So I absolutely have to put The Martian on my list. But today we're going to be talking about Project Hail Mary. First, we're going to start off with a kind of a non spoiler review of the book, Stubble, and then we're going to go into a spoiler. So maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of this broadcast is going to be non-spoiler. You can listen to what we have to say about the book. We've both read the book. Now, Stubble, I have listened to the audiobook.
Yeah.
Um, and I enjoyed it so much. It was fantastic. And I have to tell you, there are very specific things about the audiobook that I want to mention. But Stubble, did you listen to the audiobook, or did you read the hardcover book? What did you choose?
I read it on my Kindle.
Oh, you have a Kindle. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. That is
I,
fantastic.
I,
Um,
I usually buy the books in hardcover when I know that I really like them. So I read them first in another format.
that does make sense, and I can understand doing that. I did want to ask, does the hard copy, well, does the version you have, does it have illustrations?
Yes, it has some illustrations at the beginning of you know the the, the spacecraft. You see an illustration, not a very detailed illustration, but you get a sense of it. I don't know if you got a sense of it from the audiobook, how it looked, how it worked. But yeah, maybe you could answer that.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I didn't get any additional. I understand that the version I purchased, I also get a hard copy or a digital version.
Yeah,
But I didn't venture into the digital version to see if there were illustrations that went with this book. And, I think it is very interesting that this book certainly is, I actually heard you, the first time I heard you talk about this book was during our member only call, Stubble.
yeah,
You were talking about the book. You were speaking to Robert about the book, and I remember, I think Robert had said that you have to go into the book without knowing anything. You just have to go into the book and read.
yeah.
And I said, oh, I wonder what, maybe this is. I wondered what type of approach this book would take, and it was surprisingly, it felt very natural and very easygoing. Everything flowed so incredibly well in this book, Stubble. I can't
Yeah.
imagine anybody not loving this book.
Yeah, and I thought it would appeal to Robert because he likes the hard sci-fi bit, but it's not overwhelming. It's very accessible, and it's a very good story, and you love the characters.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think that what's so interesting about this is that it is the one character who's telling you this story that comes across so incredibly genuine. It is an adventure. You go on this great adventure with this character, and it's wonderful. You're going along on the ride with this. It doesn't feel like you're excluded or that your knowledge is not important. there's almost some times where you feel like you have to work the problem, Stubble, like an engineer,
Yeah.
which we always hear people say you've got to work the problem, people who do these sort of special operations. And
Yeah.
I got a sense that the book almost provokes you to do that, to work the problem in your own mind. Did you find yourself doing that as you were reading the book?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I have a basic scientific interest, and I think it's good if you have that, but it's not necessary. If something goes over your head, you can still enjoy the story. It doesn't stop you from enjoying the story. And I tried to anticipate how he was going to solve problems, and sometimes I had anticipated the correct way, and sometimes they did something completely different. But I found it fascinating all the time.
It certainly does keep your attention. And I think one of the strengths of the book is that the point in time where, let's say, the book starts at, it might be considered the midpoint of the story, right, Stubble?
Yeah.
I
So
guess if you look at it from that point of view.
yeah. So this is not giving away any details or anything. It's uh, you start off with a character who doesn't really know where he is, and then the story unfolds, and then there are flashbacks where we learn why he is where he is and what he is doing. And so you have two stories going simultaneously, both what's happened before and what's going to happen. And and I think he maneuvers it brilliant in a brilliant way.
It certainly was in a brilliant way, and it felt very natural. You weren't sort of overwhelmed by building up from the beginning to the midpoint, and then from the midpoint to the end. Kind of going right into it, you feel quite so much more involved in the story, I think.
Yeah,
And honestly, I think that is quite remarkable. It also, kind of set it up for speculation in your own mind. I wondered, what was going on, and why was this person or character in this situation. It was absolutely fascinating as things are slowly revealed to you,
yeah,
and in quite a natural manner. It didn't feel like you pushed a button and then you were loaded with a whole bunch of information. It didn't happen that way. It happened in a more gradual way that was realistic, and in a way that you could understand it. So I have to say that in regards to that, I was very impressed with the manner that the story was told. Also, the characters, Stubble, in the series, and you and I are going to talk a little bit more about the characters here with the main characters. There's, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 that we're going to talk about because they are really significant to this story. But they certainly do almost have a backstory from the very beginning. They're somewhat dynamic and have depth to them, which is something that I was not expecting for characters that you don't know anything about. There is also a very strong focus on science, so I thought that was incredibly important as well. The author loves science,
yeah,
and I think that that's so important when we're talking about enjoying a book about science fiction, and also having this great adventure which you go on through this journey. Certainly very satisfying. And I'm not going to say what the end is, but I am going to say that I enjoyed the ending. Stubble, you mentioned to me, you said that the ending would be great, and it was great. And I'm still kind of smiling from the ending for the character. A nice ending, and certainly, maybe the best choice for that character, I think.
yeah,
Certainly somebody who is different, and very kind of ironic ending in a way. But I would say, as far as I'm concerned, I really think this book is like a 4 out of 5, maybe even a 5. If I went ahead and had to do a deep criticism of it, which I didn't do. This was a pleasure reading this book. I read this book, and it was a pleasure to me. So when I took the approach of what I thought about this book, I didn't have any intentions of necessarily criticizing anything in it. I just wanted to see exactly how enjoyable would I find something, when normally I'm accustomed to reading peer reviewed journals that don't have this type of excitement and enjoyment in them. So this was such a lovely twist, or textbook information, or papers from other colleagues that don't have this much excitement associated with science. Yeah, I think that this sends such a positive message for people to just enjoy what the future can hold. What do you think, Stubble?
Yes, absolutely. And I would also say that even when there are setbacks, there is an enthusiasm from the character's point of view, and there's because it could easily become very depressed and very downer and very in the situation that they find themselves in. But there's always a positivity. There's always a possible road ahead, and I really like that. And I suppose it's more interesting than reading your work papers and whatever you're reading.
It definitely is. And, it's not that I'm saying that science isn't cool or exciting, but there is a lot of additional reading that doesn't have this type of fun associated with it. I was having fun while I was reading this, and I got the impression, even during the difficult times, that the main character was also enjoying this because he was doing what he loves. So that, I think, also came across in the story, and that was an important element in the story, and something that does actually get touched on a little bit as we start to kind of look at the story from, as a whole. Let's say initially how this character starts out in his where his credentials lie and where he is in his life. So the other thing I was going to say, did you want to comment on?
Yeah, I would just want to say, if there's one thing I would criticize, it is that there are, we're still spoiler free here, so let's see. There are psychologically very troubling things in the beginning with some people that he used to know. And maybe I didn't get that. He said that he reacted in a negative, but I didn't really feel it as the reader. Maybe that is one criticism. If you know what I'm talking about, we can go into details later on. But I didn't feel his anguish, if you say.
Certainly, and it's very interesting that there are frustrating moments for the character in the book, and the notion of where the frustration is focused to, and his sense of responsibility in this book, and the sense of a responsibility to not just himself but to everyone affected in the story. As you can imagine, the character may sometimes misplace that weight on his shoulders. But what I can say is that I think that this is a mature character who probably has, we're given a certain background on this person, but he's probably seen a lot and done a lot prior to this. And, I think that this might be one of the greatest challenges of his life. So if you're looking for something like that, if you're looking for a science fiction book that has someone in maybe the greatest challenge of their life, and it's science fiction, this is the book for you. Certainly becomes a moment where he can be incredibly proud of what he's accomplished. It may not be what he thought he was going to be doing or the way he thought he was going to be doing it, but in the end, he certainly came out as someone who was quite accomplished, and certainly did what he thought was right. And the outcome, certainly there was a huge payoff. So what I'm really trying to say is that this is a person who was put into a circumstance somewhat beyond their control, but made the best of it. So
Yes.
I don't want to say too much more about it.
Should we move on to the spoiler-filled
Yes,
section now, perhaps?
let me just put the spoiler in the banner so that we
Yeah.
know.
We can just say that we recommend this book for anyone who hasn't read
I
it.
highly recommend this book. I think that this would be a great summer read. I think it's really one of the most imaginative books I've ever read, and I think that it really is a great adventure that's meant for you to enjoy and speculate along with the character about it is about space. So I guess I'm you can tell by the picture on the cover of the book. So I don't have to surprise you with that notion. But I think that alone, did it work? Let's see, show. That alone is so important. If you certainly, there's just so much to say about it. Yes, I recommend it. Guys, pick up this book, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, that Stubble recommended to me. And now we are doing the review of it. We're going to be doing a spoiler review now, everybody. So at this point, there will be spoilers. I put it down at the bottom. You guys can see spoiler. Just keep in mind, we are going to be talking about spoilers about the book Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Now, Stubble, you know, I think it's really interesting that this particular character, Ryland Grace is the main character, starts off as a teacher, which many scientists do this, many academics do. It's like we all teach. But what I thought was really funny was that the author chose to pick a researcher who kind of walked away from the research community.
Yeah.
And this does happen for different reasons. And let's say in this particular case, maybe not all, but perhaps one of the main reasons why Ryland walked away is because his theories were interpreted as being too extreme. Now, I don't know. I wonder if Weir decided to seek this particular, path for this this character, Ryland, maybe just like a redemption for scientists whose ideas or concepts have been questioned in recent years, despite their credentials or even their intentions. None of these scientists have bad intentions towards anyone, and they may have ideas that might be different. But there has been sort of a lot of criticism of scientists recently. Do you think his intention was to kind of give some sort of relevance, especially in situations like Ryland, who came up with the idea that life could evolve outside of a water basis?
Yeah. I think he wanted to show that you don't have to live in this box when it comes to science. You can think outside the box, and so as we're in spoilers now, he discovers something about a third into the book. When we talked the other night, you were just on the cusp of meeting, shall we call it, the engineer?
Yes.
Yeah. And what did you think of the engineer when you first met him?
The alien engineer.
Yes.
I thought he was fascinating. However, I'm not going to lie. When Ryland said that he looked like a spider, it scared me because I'm scared of spiders. And so I thought to myself, wow, I can't even get past the way the alien looks. How on earth would I even be able to communicate with him if I had to? Clearly Ryland, knows what he's doing and was not shocked by the aliens, by Rocky. He calls him Rocky, right, Stubble?
Yeah. Rocky and Adrian is, reference to the Rocky movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ryland was not shocked by his appearance, and yet I was somewhat taken back by Rocky's appearance. I don't even know what he looks like, but the fact that he said he looked like a spider, still bothers me.
But you got some information, then you formed the image in your head. Like it was not as big as Ryland, and it was had a stony surface, and you got these other descriptors. But then you formed the image in your mind, and I don't think your image of Rocky is the same as mine. I think there are some differences. And it's the beauty of books, because in a movie you have to define it for everyone the same. But we have the theater of the mind, so we experience everything. If you read in a book, you go through a white fence. It's a different fence for everyone, and the same here. It's a different alien for everyone. But I really enjoyed Rocky throughout the book. I thought the book was half science book and half buddy comedy book. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it came out of the blue because you weren't expecting it at that point in the book. You were focused on the problem of him solving this thing, and then he just shows up a third into the book, and I really enjoyed their efforts in communicating.
Yes, certainly, and I think I should mention, and of course, Ryland is very clear to say this. It's ironic that he picked or said that Rocky looked like a spider, because spiders have how many eyes? They have a ton of eyes, but Rocky doesn't have any visible eyes that Ryland could
No,
see at that point, and he makes a determination that Rocky doesn't use vision to see.
no.
So
He basically uses sonar for sight in quotation.
yes. And
Yeah,
so, you know, kind of adding to what you're saying, this collaboration between him and Rocky in the audiobook, Stubble, um, Rocky makes noises, actual noises that are unintelligible. And then
yeah,
once Ryland is capable of understanding his language, then he makes the same noises, but with that still kind of similar sound,
yeah,
which they keep throughout the book, so you know who is speaking at which time. But it's also interesting to see him be able to collaborate. I mean, they built a I can't remember what it's called. Is it a dock, like a
yeah. Sort of a docking tube of some kind.
That's incredible. I didn't even know you could do that. And they built one so that each of them could see one another properly and
Yeah,
communicate. And then their atmospheres are different, and there were so many differences that they were able to work out from a scientific point of view. It's like the people from NASA who are doing this, and of course, we see these incredible movies about missions where you need to have the best engineering minds working on it, and this is what it was.
yeah.
Stubble, it was unbelievable how he was able to collaborate with Rocky, but also Ryland himself is unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, and concerning the docking tube, it was smart of Andy Weir to have the alien technology build a docking tube, because then he didn't have to explain it to us.
Yes, that's true.
So, so we are just okay. They have the technology. We don't have to focus on that bit. So it was smart of him to do it that way. And what's your question? I missed the question there.
Oh, the next question.
Yeah,
Well, the other thing that I want to mention is that for me, when I look at this book, and if I were to make the book change the order in the way the story was told, it's, for me, it sounds like the beginnings of sort of like the beginnings of the modern space program justification. Here's our justification. In the event there's some major, catastrophe where the sun shuts down, this is what we need to do. Here you go. This is my
yeah,
presentation. Thanks for joining me this afternoon, guys. This is what we need to do.
yeah. We
And
must spend these billions on these things in case it's something that's mucking up our sun.
And it's so exciting to be that person in the room who gets to do that presentation. And we've kind of seen movies where the person's like, well, who's giving the presentation? And they're like, you are. And you're
Yeah,
like, oh, well,
yeah.
here's the presentation.
And what did you think? Because there's one big ask in the book, and that's the astrophage. Because it's both the solution and the problem, and you have to buy into that thing exists. And what did you think of it? Could you think of something like that evolving from whatever?
Yeah, I can. Of course, we're going to be discovering, more and more things that exist in nature beyond our current capabilities of detection. Yes, I can imagine that. What I think is interesting, we always, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy talked about orders of magnitude. And they were very clear. It's like, it's all about orders of magnitude. What looks like, the size of a small pebble, could be an entire galaxy, an entire world around, I think it was around this dog's collar that was inside of a ball. These orders of magnitude represent a lot of things, a lot of creatures and beings we possibly could yet to discover. We don't really know. I think it's a whole nother area of discovery. But I also think that I think that if we're going to be looking at the importance of trying to advance in science and technology, one of the major obstacles, or at least something that I heard is a major obstacle, is that we don't have, we're limited by storage space and by energy.
Yeah.
So those two things, like those are the two major things that really limit us from doing a lot of things that we could do. And, I mean, look at what happened during the lockdown where we couldn't even get those computer chips. And then all of a sudden, you couldn't get certain things. And that was just a simple, boat going across the ocean and not being able to take the products off of what was on there. So I think it's very interesting that it solves both of those things. The ability to have, a somewhat more prolific source of energy that is, literally grows itself, and also being able to have a way to store information. I mean, he even alluded and said some remark about how they had downloaded the entire Library of Congress. Maybe I'm wrong that he said, I believe that's what he said. I said,
Yeah.
what? I said, that'd be great. I wish I could download the whole Library of Congress. Of course, no one can, but he has it somehow on that ship. The woman who worked with him, who we're going to talk about in a minute, made sure he had that. And they also made sure that he had video games. He's playing Star Trek Online. Who knows what he's playing? He's playing all those fun video games. And there's a reason for it. I think that it had to demonstrate that there had to be some cultural significance for him to have activities outside of the ship, so to speak, away. There's no holodeck. So, that becomes his holodeck. Reading becomes his holodeck. Playing video games becomes his holodeck in a sense. But that limitation of storage and of energy was solved here. And I'm willing to buy into anything. I wish it were true, not the threat to the sun, but I wish we could find something like that, Stubble.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like that. There was something he was missing at the end. I don't remember what it was. It was ironic when he had all the other papers, but they hadn't downloaded something. I don't remember what it was now. But like the woman you talked of, you need someone like that to make someone in that position with that kind of authority to make these things happen, because it won't happen on themselves.
And you and I were also talking about this, not in as much detail as we're going to go into right now, but we were talking about this, the role of the character of, I think it's Eva Stratt is her name. And I immediately had told you that she reminded me of the character that Emily Watson plays in the Chernobyl series. I think the woman's name is Ulsa Kamuk or something like that. I'm sorry. I mispronounced your name, Dr. Kamuk. But the point is that she was pivotal in a lot of the elements in real life, when the events surrounding Chernobyl. And it's pretty clear that this Project Hail Mary could not take place without Eva Stratt's intervention and idea, because this entire thing is an adventure where Ryland is on a spaceship going to find out what this creature is necessarily, and how they're going to be able to solve it from not completely devouring the sun. There's the ultimate goal here is for him to find a solution to these problems. And it really is something that's incredibly complicated, and it has a fast turnaround, this sort of fast turnaround, right, Stubble? What did you think about? I thought the fast turnaround reminded me of what we saw in the movie Contact, where it seemed like no one could help Jodie Foster. And then all of a sudden there was a company in Asia, I think it might even have been in China, who said, oh, we can build that for you in a week. And she said, excuse me? And they're like, oh yeah, we have the tech. We can make it for you. And they do. What did you think about the ability to just get things done, Stubble, the potential for it and the accomplishment of it?
Yeah, I think the Chernobyl character, I think she was representing the scientific community as a whole. That wasn't the character from history, but I think that you need these powerful characters who can make these decisions, because if there was no one in charge, then nothing would have happened. Everyone would argue and say that there's someone else's responsibility. like we always do, both nations and people, no one takes responsibility. So I think I've heard that for some people she rubbed them the wrong way, or readers that is. But I think she was a great character, and she had an interesting personality as well. Because she was so matter of fact, but then she, the reason she was so matter of fact was because she knew what the consequences were, and she had to sacrifice some of her own personality or her own, what do you call it? She had sacrificed a lot just to get things done, of her personal self, and but I think something that you enjoyed was probably around halfway through the book when one of the astronauts and her had regular romantic encounters.
Yeah, I mean, can you blame them? I mean, come on. This is something that I think is in a lot of books. It's human contact. It's about having intimacy, and it means something. And it's something that has to occur because it's a desire. It's an inherent desire in people, and I think that's fine. I think it was going to happen, and there was a comment about it being very pleasurable, and Ryland was noticeably uncomfortable about it, of course, because it was such a casual way to talk about such an intimate act. Certainly not in a disrespectful manner at all. Nothing was being said that was disrespectful. However, the acknowledgement of the need for it was there. And I thought that was interesting for Weir to include in the book. He felt like he had to put that in because it's the truth. It's the truth. And I have to give him a special star for that, Stubble. You are correct. As soon as I saw that, I thought they thought of everything, and maybe some of the most important things in something like this, in a story like this. Now, I kind of wondered, Stubble, I think Ryland felt that the alien Rocky may have higher intelligence than he does. Is the alien smarter than Ryland, or does the alien just think outside of the box?
I think his mind works differently. I think he can memorize things in a different way, and maybe he's not as solving things, I think his mind works more like a computer than like a human's mind works. That he can remember stuff, but he maybe can't think on the spur of the moment in the same way, perhaps. I don't know. But he seemed very intelligent, and I think I don't think they said this right out, but I think that he has a sense of humor. I think, but I thought that it was interesting that he wanted to see that someone saw him sleep when he was sleeping. That that was a cultural thing, that they watched each other sleep, and it was a thing that gave them comfort, and so I like that. And I don't know if I answered your question there, but I just went off on something. But something that I mentioned in the spoiler-free section that maybe we weren't clear. One of my criticism of it was that these fellow astronauts that deceased on the journey, that I would have liked to get more sense of loss, more sense of grievance coming through the voice in the text. But that's my only gripe at all.
I think to answer that question, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I think that the point in the story where Ryland does sort of the space funeral, if you will, he has and of course that's naturally what you would do when you see, unfortunately you want to remember someone. I don't think he had remembered everything in full yet about his relationship with these characters. So that may be untrue.
That's true.
It may be untrue, Stubble. I don't know, but I have a feeling that it took him a while, even past the point where he comes to his realization, the turning point in the story with Astrophage and Tyomoeba. I think it's what it's called, Tyomoeba.
Yeah.
Even at that point, things are still coming back to him. And for someone who you and I talked about how this could be appealing to someone who has an analytical mind, but also if you don't have an analytical mind, it's appealing. At some point, Ryland, although has an incredibly analytical mind, he doesn't have that in the beginning because he's wondering where he is and what's going on. So some of that, perhaps he was still recovering from that. And a lot of times an emotional response or how you respond to things that are tragic that happened to you don't come back right away after
Right.
after amnesia, especially after amnesia. We've seen stories of people who have forgotten that their spouse has died, things like that. And then
Yeah.
when they realize what's happened, then all of a sudden they're a different person. We don't actually get to see Ryland as a normal person until the very end of the book, and it's very clear that he is himself again because he is teaching again. But I think that is very interesting observation, and
Yeah.
certainly something to think about, because for most people, I'm not going to say for everyone, but I think for most people being put in that situation, they may not survive that. But Ryland could do it. And I think the fact that he also had separated himself from the world and talked about how he didn't necessarily have as many friends as everybody else had, how Rocky became his friend. Now all of a sudden Rocky has a different role in his life. And he, I don't think, was looking for this. He didn't know he was going to meet and have a friend now. Now his whole life has changed.
Yeah.
This even one friend can make a huge difference in a person's life like this. And someone who gets him, someone who understands him. Rocky's not trying to be his friend because he wants to screw him over or do something horrible. He's a legitimate friend. That's Rocky views Ryland as a legitimate friend. And this is something I think that a lot of people would say would mean more to them than anything else, to know that somebody else out there values your friendship and values you as a person. I mean, weren't you touched, Stubble, when you heard it, the book, when he talked about how there was a contest about how they could find the right food for Ryland? I mean, can you
Yeah.
imagine? That was so, I just thought to myself, that's amazing that so
Yeah.
many people cared, so many aliens cared about, someone who is not the same alien as they are. Like, it's just remarkable that there would be so much caring and so much thought put into somebody, because he is an important person. And it just was just unbelievable. It
Yeah.
was so good. It felt so good. And I think that to make a science fiction book also where you get that feel good feeling, it's not so easy to convey. A lot of times there are harsh realities in science fiction books that you have to accept. And, there's a certain sense of loss that isn't really recoverable. This one feels like there are so many successes, so many things to celebrate. He essentially has to leave Earth behind. And this is something that I thought was interesting, Stubble. And of course, we see these science fiction movies where, they've got the slick, cool looking people in the ship, and they're all hot looking and they're floating around. It looks all cool, and they talk about Earth and everything. But Ryland, I don't think, is going to be going back for a long time. They almost allude to the fact that he can go back, but he's holding it off for a while. Stubble, why is Ryland staying in the alien world, do you think?
Uh, I, I don't know his personal reasons, but just for the book reasons, I think it's a good thing he didn't go back, because now we can imagine how the world turned out here without him showing us that. And why he stayed there, I think Rocky was his best friend. He didn't have so many friends in on Earth, and he could still teach, and teaching was his passion. So I don't know if Andy Weir was a teacher by trade, but I could imagine it, because he really lifts up the aspect of teaching, and I think he was comfortable there, and that in I don't know why he would want to go back, because he had it better there, perhaps. But and I think it's better for the story. If he had gone back, there would be parades, and there would, or there would be had been famine and war and whatever. But now we can speculate what would happen. And when he made a turn towards the end, when he was on his way back, but he decided to help his friend, that was the moral decision of the story, and it made me so happy that he chose friendship over survival.
Yeah, Stubble, that was an incredibly interesting part of the story. And I've been seeing some themes like this where people have to make decisions where they can either make a decision that presumably looks like it would benefit themselves or put someone else's welfare before theirs. And, I think that this was a perfect example of that. And, I think that Ryland, even if he mapped out the pros and cons, I don't think it mattered. I think what mattered was that he didn't want to see any harm come to his friend. And
Right.
the only way to prevent that would be to go back and make sure he could make sure that Rocky was okay. I think Rocky was happy to see him. There was, I believe in the book, there was a point where Rocky was surprised or elated to see Ryland,
Yeah.
and not expecting to see Ryland. There's a lot about Rocky that we don't know.
No.
But what we do know is that maybe he's never had a relationship like this before with anyone. That's something else to think about. We don't know what their culture is like. We don't
No.
know what.
But we get some hints about their culture, because they watch each other sleep, which means that they don't live solitary. But he had to live solitary for 46 years because all his shipmates had passed away. So imagine someone who's live in a pack society, more or less, and then have to live on their own for 46 years, and before a complete stranger shows up in another spacecraft. So I think the Rocky people, I think they had a very tight community, because they had these they watched each other sleep and all of those things, and they seem like nice people, nice creatures.
They do seem like nice creatures. And what also is kind of interesting was that, I hope I'm remembering what I was going to say. Yes, Ryland had mentioned that he felt that unfortunately the reason why Rocky's crew had passed away was because of radiation.
Yeah.
And I think that was interesting how both, let's say, I can't remember the name of Rockies. It's Irandians. The Irandians have certain understandings of space travel and science, and the Earthlings, have certain understandings of space travel and science. But, there may be concepts that are different from one versus the other. And that I found true. It's just true. It's 100% true. Interpretations of the same principles can be very different, and what gets pursued and what doesn't get pursued, what gets focused on, or essentially becomes the basis for even your space program. Perhaps they don't have anything that shields them from heavy radiation. This is something to think about, and certainly, I think it's interesting that Ryland is even already starting to protect them and talk about how and why that happened to them and how he's concerned about it. But Rocky was the sole survivor for whatever reason. So I also think, thank goodness, at least one person had survived. It would have been such a disaster, because I don't know how the main character would have been able to do this alone. And I think that also, ideally, being able to learn the language was something that I was impressed with Ryland. He learns this language, and I don't know exactly, Stubble, how long, because we do see a lot of time references, how it'll say, oh, we have 40 days, or we have, so many years. But it felt like he learned Rocky's language relatively quickly. And he's not speaking English to anybody else other than to himself. It was quite a remarkable communication and thing that happened between the two of them.
Yeah, he used the computer in the beginning to to map out the words and to make the computer make the sound that he was. So they had a communication device, but after a while they didn't really need it anymore. But I got the sense that it had gone maybe months or something at the end.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. And I wasn't quite sure, Stubble, when it said the time, like I could understand him learning the language in 30 days. I could see that. That's not so far fetched if that's what you're doing all day long. And after all, Rocky, I think, was around him a lot. I think you had mentioned the reference about watching Ryland sleep, but I have a feeling that Rocky was watching him 24/7 just to understand what was going on. He wants to save his planet too. So there was motivation for him as well in that regard. Now,
while we're talking about speech here,
yes.
what did you think about the expression? You know, a few days after I read it, finished reading it, I often thought, good, and you know, all these things that they say, you know, to emphasize positive and negative things. What did you think of that bit?
I thought it was needed. I think you need these sort of, maybe they're not idiomatic expressions, but I guess for the sake of communication, there needed to be shorter versions of communicating whether something was good or bad, or a certain level of understanding. There had to be something like that between the two of them. And perhaps as we're interpreting it, it makes sense to us in our language, but I have to assume that there was some sort of special way that they were communicating that isn't easily described in a written word. There might be other nuances and things, like where he talked about how Rocky would move a certain way. And, you know,
how his tone shifted if he was excited or sad or whatever.
Yeah. And I thought about like Lucas the spider, even though Lucas has eyeballs and everything. But after a while, Rocky became very real. Like Rocky's a person, even though he looks very different, which is fine. But he is a person, and that's something to consider. There are all these other elements about these aliens that we haven't even scratched the surface about. So that's a discovery in itself. Riley could probably spend the rest of his life even trying to understand remotely everything about the these aliens. I keep forgetting the name of their planet, the Eridanians, something like that.
Iridonians, or I don't know. I don't remember.
And Stubble, there's a lot of good comments in the chat, and I did just want to mention that Tom Jr. Jackson is here, who is obviously moderating the chat for us, and thank you, Tom. And Darth Plato, Daniel Barry Sports Highlights is here as well. Jared Sapper says it's the best science fiction he's ever read. I guess I could show it. Jared says it's the best science fiction he's ever read. And Tom Jr. Jackson says that Andy Weir used to work for NASA, and this is why it seems so real. We also have another comment about Tom saying that he highly recommends the audiobook, which is what I read. Also, let's see. Philip the Fool says, "What's up, y'all? I love this book." And also says that about in regards to the two other astronauts who were with Ryland, I guess he barely had remembered their names by the time they sent him into space, which is interesting. Jonathan Peck says, "I need to read the book. I do love The Martian, both the book and the movie." And Jonathan asks, "I'm curious about how would Phil Lord and Chris Miller would adopt the movie, because they will be they're planning on trying to shoot the film next year." What do you think about an adaptation of something like this, Stubble, which, oh my gosh, this could actually be rather than a film, let's say, which there's nothing wrong with making a film, but this could be a series, like a television series. What do you think, Stubble?
Oh, it could work as a series. I would personally prefer a film, like a 2-hour, 20-minute film or something. I have a very clear image in my head of how everything looks, and I'm sure that the film or the TV series will look completely different, because everyone have a different image in their head. And I just hope they make it good. The source material is fantastic, but it doesn't matter the creator and the material. Sometimes you just have to have that special thing, that alchemical thing that, make it resonate. So I don't have a good answer for how they would make
Well, one thing I
it.
don't want to see, Stubble, one thing I don't want to see is them to take things out of sequence as it occurs in the book. I don't want to see them start off where he's teaching middle school and he gets approached by, they find out about the Petrova line. I don't want it to start like that. I want it to start where he's in a space station. He's like this, and then he was like, like all freaked out. Yeah. I wanted, this is just my personal desire. It doesn't mean it's the right or a wrong way, but I think it would lose some of its charm and sense of discovery, Stubble, if they started it where he's, somewhere, wherever, I don't remember what, maybe he's in California, lucky guy. And, he's at the middle school or something. And they're like, oh, have you heard about this Petrova line? Like, that would be awful, Stubble.
Yeah, because you have that thing in the end. So I hope people who haven't read it are listening, but you have that thing in the end where he discovers that he wasn't a volunteer. He always thought he was a volunteer until he discovered that he wasn't. And that may also be one of the reasons that he doesn't have, close connections to the other astronauts, because he didn't form those bonds really early on. And then they were asleep for how long? I don't know. But by the way, how would you feel about being unconscious and asleep and having a robot, turn you around and do all the things that it does?
I could do it once, but I couldn't go back in. In other words, if I were on Earth and it happened, and then they sent me somewhere and I woke up, I'd be fine. But if I'm not on Earth and they try to redo it, I couldn't do it, because I have this certain sense of comfort of like remembering Earth a certain way, or being vulnerable like that here on Earth feels very different than being somewhere in another, let's say, part of the galaxy. It's very disturbing to me. It would feel like I didn't have any control over the situation. At least while on Earth, I would feel like I did. But we clearly see, as you said, Stubble, Ryland didn't have a choice in this. He was forced on the mission. Yeah. He was and you and I had alluded to this. It's a situation where he made the best, he made lemonade out of lemons, because, inevitably he was not okay with this trip. And they, I know Eva kept saying, well, we need to know by 5 p.m. tomorrow if you're going. But I got a feeling that he was going to go, whether he said yes or no. Got that sense, he's on a carrier, right? They were on a carrier or something like that, Stubble. And he has no place to go. What if, he can't say no? It's pretty much all been decided. Things are going to happen.
Yeah, they're saying that, okay, if you don't go, then we're more or less clubbing you on the head and throwing you in the spacecraft, and you were going in anyway, more or less.
Well, that was one of the things that I have to say that we see sometimes in science fiction. It's not all the time, but we see sometimes in science fiction where characters get put in situations like this against their will. And, if I were going to look at another, it's not the same situation, but in Star Trek, the motion picture, the main character.
It was a couple of years since I saw it, so maybe I won't remember this.
Well, it's the V'ger movie, with V'ger.
Yeah.
And the character, the woman character, the female character, whose name is escaping me, she gets taken by V'ger and is no longer what she was before. She's now part of V'ger, part of a greater, entity. And that was against her will. She didn't ask for that. But we see time and time again in a lot of these science fiction stories where people are kind of forced, perhaps maybe not so strongly forced, but are put in situations where they didn't ask for this. And now they have to kind of make the best of a situation. Now, I did also want to say that I think it's very interesting that Eva thought that he was good enough to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
So this is, astronauts are not going into space right now because they're trying to save the entire galaxy. It is space exploration and it's hard, but it's like, you guys have to save the entire galaxy. What? Excuse me? This is a very special mission. And I think that's why Ryland felt that was too much to put on his shoulders. I love the part when Eva says, Do it for your children. He says, I don't have any children. She says, yes, you do. The children in your classroom, do it for them. And I thought that was very interesting. What do you think about that, Stubble? She wasn't trying to guilt him, but she knew he cared about the students and about the future of the planet and science. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that he was of the mindset that if they had asked him in the right way, he might have gone, but they more or less forced his hand, and then he put up his, I don't want to do this because you're forcing me to. And but he loved his children, his students, and so that that was his weak spot.
And
And the whole.
And also, Stubble, if we both remember this correctly, there was a team who was going to go in this mission, and I'm sure they fought over a spot to do this, but there was some sort of accident, and it resulted in the loss of some very talented engineers and scientists who were going to go on the mission, and now all of a sudden, you don't have those candidates anymore, and things like this do happen, unfortunately.
And I wonder if he knew how he was treated at the end, how he was forced on the mission, more or less. Would he have been as enthusiastic at the beginning of the after his awakening? Because he went right at the problem. He figured out where he was and what the problem was, and then he went right at it. But if he knew by then that it was not by choice that he was there, then maybe he wouldn't have been as enthusiastic about solving stuff. Maybe he would have been a bit butthurt and I don't know, just speculating.
I also was going to say that I was not expecting him to meet aliens. I thought he was going to have to do this mission completely solo. So it was a pleasant surprise that he wasn't entirely alone. And of course, it is a very soothing thought that there are other, there's other intelligent life out there. I think that they did a good job. Andy Weir did a good job in this book with that by gently easing us into that at a point where Ryland had already realized who he was now. So he knows who he is and his situation and understands what had happened to him, let's say. And maybe you're right, Stubble. Maybe it's not till the end of the story that he realizes that he was forced into it. Maybe.
Yeah. And I also find it interesting that Rocky and his people, that they couldn't see the stars. They couldn't see space. They couldn't see. They used hearing for a sight. So they couldn't see anything in space because you can't hear anything. Sound doesn't travel in space. So it's fascinating how they developed the space program. And because they had to get to the edge of they had to build machines to map out how things were because they couldn't see their star. They couldn't see their perhaps moon or other planets. And so I thought it interesting how the development into the space program thing would have happened.
I think it is very interesting. I think that bats have been flying for thousands of years, and their vision is poor. I'd say their vision is poor. Let's say it's not the best vision. They fly in the dark. It's not the best vision, or they sense something different. But I find it completely just such a celebration and looking at a perspective from an alien's point of view, which we can't thoroughly understand, but we can accept it. And Ryland has accepted living amongst, of course, they said they made an area for him that looks more like Earth, but it certainly is wonderful. What a wonderful, heartfelt story, Stubble. And I feel like Ryland is making a huge difference on the Iridian planet because they've never seen a human before. It must be such a different experience to speak to, Ryland.
And it makes you wonder: do they have wars and conflict there, or are everyone just going along with each other and have a good time, or do they have strife and war and such things that we have here? Maybe they don't. Maybe they live in harmony. Maybe it's a utopia. We don't know.
That's true. We don't know, and it is something to think about. I just love this book so much, Stubble. And
Yeah. But by the way, what did you think about that? They're not breathing oxygen. They're breathing nitrogen, I think.
yeah, it was nitrogen or ammonia. We breathe.
Yeah, ammonia perhaps.
Okay, because you know that we
I
breathe
don't
in
remember.
oxygen, but we also breathe in some nitrogen, I believe, as well.
Yeah, it was probably ammonia. I confuse things.
No,
But
it's from what I've read. Like I don't study air composition, but from what I've read, that we breathe in a certain amount of oxygen and nitrogen.
yeah,
So
yes,
I thought it was great. I mean, it's at least a compound you recognized.
yeah,
I
and
also
that they lived in a, you know, 200 degrees Celsius or whatever. What's that in Fahrenheit? Around 400 or something. Yeah. So
I thought it
I,
was imaginative and conditions we've seen, reported throughout space already, right?
yeah, yeah,
So it's something we can imagine. Conditions not favorable to us, but if it could support life of some kind, certainly favorable to them. So that was good. I mean, about the only thing I started to think of when he started talking about how hot things were was Taq Polymerase. It's this it's a bacteria that's found in hot springs in Yellowstone Park, and maybe not just Yellowstone Park, but what the thing about it is that they use that there's an enzyme that breaks down DNA segments, and it's used in polymerase chain reactions, so you can make multiple copies of a set of DNA. And they
yeah,
discovered the it's called DNA polymerase. They discovered this enzyme in Taq polymerase, and what they found is that when they apply it's like a cycle, they apply heat to it, it breaks apart the DNA, replicates, it immediately replicates after that, and then you
yeah,
have multiple copies of DNA. So the way that we're able to analyze a lot of DNA these days is because they discovered that bacteria in these hot springs. So that's one of the first things that I started to think about. I said, maybe it's like Taq polymerase, or, and because I don't know how much water is in that, it might be bubbling hot, type of methane fluid that's in these
yeah,
hot springs. So I thought about that. I said, it's possible. There might be more in those hot springs and in the lava than we can really analyze because of our limitations.
yeah.
In
And that that makes you Rocky's living conditions make you question NASA just looking at the so-called Goldilocks zone in it has to have water, it has to have a certain temperature. No, it doesn't. It could be completely different. It could be great anyway.
We need to meet some Iridians, Stubble.
Yeah.
Any final comments about the book, about the author, anything pertaining to this that you'd like to say before we wrap up everything?
I want a friend like Rocky. I think he's a great character. I think he's you can trust he's handled the situation when you're doubting yourself and and um, I love the positivity of the book. I love that they did it, even though they had downer moments. They were always looking ahead and looking at solutions, finding solutions, and finding new problems and solving them, and all those things.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I did also want to say that after reading the book, I want to go ahead and come up with my own space adventure.
Yeah,
I think it encourages you to think about something like that, and I think that that's important for science fiction books to encourage people to enjoy the science that we love. There
yeah,
was so much in this. It's not just a simple story. Ryland goes through very specific, deductive reasoning as to where he is, who he is, what's going on, where he's located, what kind of food is on board, what kind of fuel, what kind of propulsion systems. This is a smorgasbord for anyone who loves the idea of space exploration and the technology that you would need in order to accomplish that. So if you love stuff like that, if you like the idea of exploring into space, imagining what it would take to go ahead and create a space program, I feel like this is it.
Yeah.
A remarkable tour de force. If you had all the resources possible, if you had unlimited resources to do this and unlimited scientific minds to take care of it, would be amazing. I mean, Stubble, there was even a scene where I think they had to go to a prison somewhere, right, Stubble? And there was,
Yeah, I think so.
and
Yes, they needed someone who had solar panels, or what was it, something like that. And there's also, there's one form of violence in this, and that's that they setting off a lot of nuclear bombs at one point. Otherwise, it's it's a non-violent, very interesting book, and it makes very it's a hard sci-fi book. It's but it's very approachable. It's very entertaining, and it's great.
I mean, this may not be true. So, Andy Weir, if you're ever, not that you'd be listening to this, but if you are listening to this, I took that as, the character that was in this prison claimed that he was not responsible for the deaths. He embezzled money, but he didn't kill anyone. But he
Right.
was in prison, and I kind of took it as a maybe a metaphor for kind of the way that scientists are being chastised or vilified today. For whatever reason. And as I said, it's purely unintentional. The science is not meant to harm or hurt anyone. But sometimes the interpretations or the comments can be seen as something that is harmful, and it's not. So that interpretation of it, with this brilliant mind being in prison, where he was not surprised that they came to speak to him, because he knows he has a good idea that he had this technology or whatever it was. It was just an unfortunate circumstance, and he was the fall guy, I guess, in this. I'm not completely absolving that person of it, but the point is that he didn't go into that meaning for people to get killed. And he was very clear in the book, and I kind of almost took that as something about that we have, unfortunately, maybe not us, but there might be times in our history where things may be misunderstood, and you end up with a situation like that. Thank goodness that Eva spanned the globe, for she's the most well-informed scientist in the world, right? Stubble.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And also that there may have been famine and war, but we get the information that they solved the problem with the sun, and that means that there's someone, the world hasn't got totally bonkers in the meantime, even if it's been maybe a hard time with some conflict and some, a lot of deaths and horrible things, but hopefully they come through at the end, and we get at least a signal that the sun is better at the end.
Yeah, we needed to see that because Rylan had worked so hard and Rocky had worked so hard in order to make this work, and so we needed to see that. I guess Rylan could see the sun. I don't know what the name is. It called Sol? Is that the name of our sun? Is there another name for our sun, like K568 star, or something? But he could see it from where he was and notice that it didn't dim, and that was very important. Because if it did dim, the whole point of this book is that there's a threat to the sun, and it could put the Earth into an early ice age, and hence every living thing would die on the planet. So it was just remarkable, Stubble. What a great victory for Andy Weir.
And here's a special thing for you. You're calling it the sun. That's not what we here in Sweden call it. We call it solen, which means the soul.
Really?
Yeah. So soul is what we use for the sun.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Maybe the rest of the world uses that for the sun, don't they?
I don't know.
I have a feeling they do.
I just gave you that. So.
Well, anyway. That's good to know, because I was playing Star Trek Online, and it had also said something about soul, and I'm like, what do they mean? And they're like, you have to go out into the space.
Yeah, soul is our sun.
Okay, so that's good to know. And Thank you, Stubble, so much for recommending Project Hail Mary. Really a fantastic read, guys. If you haven't read it, this is the summer book for you. And as someone said in the chat, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I think it's Jonathan Peck, Phil Lord and Chris Miller are want to adapt this movie, or if they were to, I think it's coming out. It's coming out, right? Stubble, I think
Yeah,
the
I don't know when. I just saw it on IMDb that they are working on it, and that I don't know who it was that was set to star in it, but it's one of the big names. I don't remember who it was now.
I thought it was it Josh Hartnett? I maybe
No,
not.
no, no. It was one of the others.
I think I just saw him in the actor in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, it's one. One of the better known actors in their 40s.
Well, Stubble, this has been such a wonderful discussion about Project Hail Mary. And I am going to go ahead and get the audiobook for The Martian as well. I'm excited to see what that book is like. And certainly, this has been such a great experience. Thank you for recommending this book. And Stubble, I look forward to the next book, the next science fiction book you recommend to me, because this has been so enjoyable. Just thank you so much, Stubble. Where can people find you?
Well, I don't have any YouTube presence except on your channel here, but you can follow me on Twitter. I just Stubble McShave or at TOMP115.
Okay, wonderful. And guys, of course, you can find me here on Positive Fandom. This is also being streamed to the Burnettwork at the same time. So we're on Positive Fandom and the Burnettwork. I just want everybody to thank everyone who turned out right now, and people who will watch this on the replay, this review of Project Hail Mary that was recommended by Stubble here, who's here with me right now, a longtime member of the PGS. I also want to say, everybody, thank you. I also want to recommend everybody to subscribe to Tom Jr. Jackson's YouTube channel. Tom Jr. Jackson's a moderator here at the PGS. Please do support him. Go over to this YouTube link and subscribe to his channel. Also wanted to mention that tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, I am going to be streaming PGS Treks right here on the Burnettwork with Julian Mushkin. So please do check that out. We're going to be talking about Strange New Worlds episode 2 and some other things. On Saturdays is going to be the members only Zoom call. Stubble, I'll see you there, right?
Yeah.
Guys, for 99 cents, as little as 99 cents, you can join the Burnettwork as a member and then join in on the members only call and speak to Robert directly. It is wonderful. And don't forget, I'm going to be doing my show Sunday brunch at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time on my channel, Positive Fandom. And there was one other one that I wanted to bring you to your attention.
And I heard you're both going topless, or what was it you said?
What? No, that is for Christmas. I'm going to be wearing a bikini top.
Yeah.
For Christmas, I'm going to get in shape, guys. I am going to get in shape. And for Christmas, I'm going to be wearing a bikini top. Thank you, Tom. It was Ryan Gosling. Thank you, Tom. That's who I was remember. And thank you also, Philip the Fool. It was Ryan. I think Jonathan Beck. It was Ryan Gosling. The other thing I wanted to say is tomorrow night on Saturday, I'm going to be doing a PGS Moving Image episode with Catherine Cook and Cameron Pasha on the Burnettwork. We're going to be talking about Blade Runner. Certainly on PGS Moving Image, we talk about the impact that the cinematic legacy has had. So we're going to be specifically talking about the films Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. That's going to be at 6 p.m. on Saturday after the members only call. Everybody, thank you so much for attending tonight. You are welcome. And thank you, Stubble, for recommending this book. I look forward to many more books like this, doing more reviews. And thank you, Tom Jr. Jackson. We are all good people. Everybody, thank you so much for coming and seeing this review of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And guys, remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.